I'm going to ask Ryan to kind of go over some housekeeping things, and then after that, he'll do our roll call. Ryan?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Healy. I'm with TDOT Aeronautics. I'll be acting as the moderator for this meeting. Today, we are joined by Commission members Steve Wright, Butch West, Kirk Huddleston, Rosemarie Fair, and George Huddleston. We've elected to have everyone's phones muted automatically in the event a consultant or another participant is called upon during a presentation. That being said, we do ask that you manage your own meeting to avoid any background noises during the meeting. If you are not actively presenting, please mute yourself unless called upon. Also, please do not put the conference call on hold. If you are needing to step away, just mute yourself. This meeting is being recorded and a court reporter will be present. So please be sure to state your name and your organization before speaking. As we get into the presentations, they are numbered to help keep people on the same page as we move through. And as we're going through the slides, just let me know and I'll click to the next slide. And then we'll get into the roll call. So I'll call every. Okay. Mr. Steve Wright.
Here.
Mr. Butch West.
Here.
Mr. Kirk Huddleston.
Here.
Ms. Rosemarie Fair.
Here.
Mr. George Huddleston.
Here.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. At this time, we'd like to recognize if there's any elected officials, either in public or via web cam or whatever. If we do have any, I'd like to recognize them at this time. Being none, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is any changes, additions to the agenda. Being none, we'll move to the next item. The approval of the minutes. The minutes were mailed out electronically to the board members for review and approval. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. So moved.
We got a motion. We have a second.
Second, Butch West.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Minutes are approved. And this time, the next agenda item is for JP, our director, to go over division report.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman Huddleston. So for the director's report, it's really hard to believe we're a full month into the fourth quarter of fiscal year 23. The first week of March, John Briggs and I attended a legislative conference in Washington, D.C. with other state aviation officials. We received updates from NASAO, FAA, AASHTO, AAAE, NBAA, NASA, and congressional members and staff. Focus areas included the upcoming FAA reauthorization, industry updates, emerging technologies, and environmental justice sustainability initiatives such as EAGLE, which we are tracking closely, which is the unleaded aviation fuels. Thanks to the support of TAA, numerous event sponsors, vendors, airport personnel, and consultants, we had a very successful 2023 annual airports conference. It was exciting to see and engage with our FAA staff from the district and regional offices there. As director, making regular visits to airports is a top priority of mine. Since the last TAC meeting in February, I was able to visit 9 airports. I have several more trips over the coming weeks. I aim to continue this practice on a weekly basis as schedules allow. On the staffing front, after 20 years of service to TDOT Aeronautics, Steve Upshaw has decided to begin a new chapter in life. Steve has presented his hard-earned notice of retirement. His last day will be June 30th, so everyone be on the lookout soon for a save the date for his retirement celebration. After more than 2 years with the Aeronautics Division, Cabrina Webb has submitted her resignation and will be starting a community planner position in the FAA's Memphis Airport District Office on May 1st. We are very sorry to see her go, but wish her the best as she continues her career in aviation. We are finalizing the process of an internal promotion for our statewide contracts and advanced aviation program lead. Under the direction of our state aviation manager, this position will assume responsibility for managing statewide contracts in engineering services, asset management, as well as UAS and AAM initiatives. So we're going to have busy summer with several positions to fill in the coming months. Over the last 2 PSRs, we have approved 24 requests totaling over $10.4 million of state, federal, and local funding towards projects. Notable awards include $2.3 million for Rogersville partial taxiway, apron, runway lighting, and PAPIs, and $2 million for Murfreesboro runway threshold relocation and remarking, taxiway rehabilitation, and overall AOA seal coat and remarking. Thanks to the dedicated efforts of Evan, Cabrina, and many others, we have finalized our state priority rating, or SPR model, for scoring projects that rely heavily on state funding. Outreach activities in the development of the SPR model have included research and interviews, working sessions with TAA Working Group and TAC, presentations during the TAA conference, a statewide survey, and third-party consultant reviews. We have a manual and a quick reference scoring calculator that will be released soon prior to the ACIP working sessions this summer. In the near future, we will be advertising for consulting services to provide on-call planning services as well as an aviation economic impact study update. We will send out an industry-wide announcement when those advertisements go live. The Aeronautics Economic Development Fund applications have gone through the scoring committee and are moving forward to the Commissioner and Governor's Office for review and final selection. And we are eagerly awaiting those awards. So it was a very eventful legislative session around aviation this year. We had a legislative amendment that was passed that changes the present law that imposes and remits a tax on a person's purchase, use, consumption, and storage of aviation fuel that is used in the operation of an aircraft or of a certificate or licensed air carrier within a transportation hub within the states. I know that's a mouthful. Basically, the prior limiting of the cap to $5 million was limited to just this current fiscal year. It further reduced the cap to $3 million in fiscal year 2024, and then lowering it down to $1 million cap on any single payer for tax year occurring fiscal 25 or later. So unfortunate to see the continued decline of the single payer cap, but on the other hand, aviation was still well supported in the 2024 budget, and I'll cover the state funding. I apologize, we're in a slide behind. Sorry, Ryan. So topics there that for updates. Go back to, we'll come back to. Okay. So I'll dive into that, but real quick, just a look ahead. We have our 4 General Aviation Regional Meetings, or GARMs, that are starting next week in Jackson and Murfreesboro. These meetings provide guidance for developing each airport's plan, along with providing an update of the Aeronautics Division's policies and procedures. Airport consultants are also invited to attend these meetings instead of having separate meetings like we've done in previous years. And if anyone listening today is planning on attending and has not registered for one of the 4, please contact your TDOT project manager and they can give you details on locations, dates, and then registration. And then lastly here, the final deadline to submit funding requests for this current fiscal year is May 24th, so it's quickly approaching. And we are working very hard to make a strong push to start those remaining program projects or begin the next phase on active projects. So, Ryan, if you'll go to the fiscal year 24 funding, there we go. So this is what we saw, the latest version coming out of the session. We are seeing a shift in the TEF allocations. So those are now going 100% to the air carriers. But we're seeing the allocations from, or appropriations from the general fund to step in and support general aviation as well as the air carriers. So you can see overall we had 85.3 million of general fund appropriations given to aviation. That is an estimated fuel tax collection for next year, so that could fluctuate. But overall, I think the big takeaway is we have $111,600,000 of state funding invested in aviation and airports. So that is very strong compared to a lot of our peer states. Not quite where North Carolina is, but we're looking to catch up pretty soon. So changes in funding, but I think aviation is still well supported. So I think that is all of my division report for this morning. Welcome to take any questions.
Any questions for JP? Comments? Being none, we'll move on to item number 7, which is the Tennessee Equity Fund revenue update, and John Briggs is going to report.
I'll try this one. That's better. Good morning, Commissioners. I have another good report for the TEF. The latest updates as of February revenue. So we collected $2,148,927 in the month of February. That brings the total for the year up to $25,417,470.20. So collections still remain pretty strong. We're $3.6 million ahead of where we were this time last year. So we're on track at this point to top last year's collections, which is good. You can see over the last several months there's kind of been a slow decline each month. So we'll see if that trend continues, but still we're on $500,000 more than we were each month last year. So any questions on TF collections? If not, I'll move on. I'm thinking I'm the next on the agenda for the aviation education program. So we're happy to announce we've been able to start that program back up. We stopped it during COVID in 2020. So this is the first time we've offered it since 2020, and we're happy to start it back up. The application period is currently open through May 15th. You can go to our website, to the Aviation Education Program tab, and there's an Apply Now button. You can click and you apply online. So it's encouraging all the airport sponsors, anyone as part of the meeting to encourage your local school, make them aware of the program, let them know, encourage them to apply. And basically it's designed to support aviation-specific education and training to introduce students to careers in aviation, and whether it be a pilot or a mechanic or administrator, and there are jobs available in aviation, and we need workers, and hopefully this will help interest students in pursuing those careers and make them aware of them. So any questions on the aviation program? Thank you.
Don, thank you. Next agenda item is number 9, and Chris Starr is absent, so I think JP's going to give us that report.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Christopher unfortunately couldn't be with us today. But if you'll go to the next slide, Ryan. So several updates on the advanced aviation program. There's a technology called AirGuard from Security Pros. It's really for drone detection. And so we're interested in testing this. There's drone detection can be really helpful for a number of different types of facilities, but certainly at airports. So we have a couple of test kind of pilot projects that we're going to do in partnership with MTSU and the Smyrna Airport. So we're going to have a 1-day demonstration at MTSU, and then we're going to run a 7-day pilot project with around the Smyrna Air Show coming up this summer. And we'll show you a little bit more about the technology. we're going to cover the cost of that demonstration and for those two. Actual deployment of this technology would be about $40,000 per year if you had a 5-year agreement, but that's something negotiable with that vendor, and I think there are other vendors out there as well. Next slide. So it uses kind of a multi-layered approach to detection, the lowest layer being RF detection, really kind of using remote ID to report out the drone ID, make, model, payload capacity, so you know what's in the airspace. There's different options there with the data. About a 10-mile range on that type of detection with different cellular or hardwired options, so it's very flexible on where that can be deployed. Next slide. There are 3 layers that they're working on. So we've got the RF detection, then you've got layer 2, which is available. It's directional finding and RF detection, and then a 3rd layer that they're working on deploying in the near future that would have you can kind of see the detection percentages there with the airspace. Next slide. So this is an example of the visual that it will give you. So you can at any time see who's operating in the airspace with kind of within a area that you set. And then if you go to the next slide, you can even go back and watch flight paths. So if you know there's a drone in the airspace and you want to see where it took off from, to be able to if you need to track down the pilot in command or observer, you've got some of the history there as well. So we're interested in testing this, and we see a lot of availability for applying this kind of across our system. Next slide. So also related to advanced aviation, we are working on a partnership with MTSU, and it's kind of a multi-layered approach, but initially it is UAS training for internal staff, so our TDOT UAS pilots. So we're going to take them through a 3-day training program that covers kind of basic skills, prepares them for the Part 107 exam. They'll learn advanced maneuvering techniques around infrastructure inspection, and then also some of the flight procedures process and the use of our software around our missions and objectives. So HR is covering that. If you go to the next slide. So we're going to expand. This is kind of the first of different initiatives. So we've got 2 classes set up for May. And then what we want to do is expand that to set up an annual training that crosses up with other agencies as well, including federal highway participation. Next slide. And then ultimately the vision is we can, with MTSU, have a partnership and have a broader annual class, demonstration flights, a competition course set up to the NIST or NIST standards, and MTSU has been great as far as providing facilities and places to do this. Next slide. And I may have skipped over it. We want to have kind of an annual UAS symposium or similar to what we have with in TDOT with the rodeos, where we get together and we have some skills competitions. We want to do that around UAS. And then as far as advanced air mobility, we are currently in discussions with several states, North Carolina, Ohio, and then North Dakota. Each of those are functioning under some very different FAA programs, but just understanding their programs and lessons learned. And our aim is to develop an AAM framework very soon and start to envision what that will look like in Tennessee. think that, see if there's another slide. Again, apologize that Christopher couldn't be here today. One other thing he's working on is a partnership with UT Knoxville that we had as a notable mention, using UAS, but also machine learning to basically do quantity takeoffs for pavement repair, pavement maintenance. So if we can fly the pavement and then get quantity takeoffs for type 1, 2, and 3 cracks using some of the newer technology that's available, and that will be amazing from the standpoint of what we can do with our maintenance contract, identify the quantities and the work for the contractors. And then we're also looking into shifting that in maybe no plans, work orders, and potentially using Sourcewell, which is a kind of a GSA type platform for procurement, where we can set up a multi-year contract for pavement maintenance. Next slide. So we did invest in an NDAA compliant drone recently, the Skyfish M4. We had some training just last week, and our plan is to use that as part of our inspection process to scan vegetation and go ahead and survey the airport approaches ourselves, and hopefully develop some deliverables that we can give to the airports that are more actionable for identifying obstructions. So we have a test, kind of a test case that's going to happen soon on runway 10 at Gatlinburg. We're also working with the McKinnon and Houston County Airport to do a scan there. So as we learn the process and software and everything, we're going to scale this up to do this across the entire state. Next slide. Okay. This may, Chairman, if you don't mind, this is kind of blending into our next agenda item, the Airport Improvement Program. We did want to provide an update on the bipartisan infrastructure law bill, airport infrastructure grants. I'm covering for Christopher on this as well, so apologies here. But as far as the bill AIG grants, there's a much different process than we have for our NPE and apportionment grants. They mirror the discretionary funding process, so there's a lot more administrative burden to this process and requirements from the FAA. So we're still working through that. We've submitted a total of 5 applications to them. Each application may have multiple projects or airports. So we have a total of 20 applications from airports. Then we've compiled that into 5 applications. The first application is the only one where we've received the block grant from the FAA. That took about 231 days from the time the airport submitted the application to us until we were able to issue a subaward. So it is a very long time, and that's why we want to be very transparent about that process and timeline. We're hoping that improves. We're continuing to push this issue with the district office, the regional office, and as well as FAA headquarters. With the second application, we had 9 airports that submitted. That block grant has still not been awarded yet by the FAA. We're somewhere between 246 to 281 days, and counting on the time since those applications were submitted to TDOT. So there is a long lead time, and it's just something for airports and the industry to be mindful about moving forward. The other 3 applications, one of which we're still packaging up, that 5th application had 4 airports, and that has a submittal deadline of May 1st. So we're still putting that one together. But we'll continue to keep the industry updated on this process, and we do hope to see that improve as we get used to this new procedure. Next slide. And that is it for the bill AIG update.
Okay, our next update will be fiscal year 23 ACIP update by Evan Lester.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, commissioners. So if you can go next slide, please, Ryan. So just to give you an update on fiscal year 23 expenditures and allocations, we have allocated now $16.8 million out of the $71.5 million that we had programmed. So we're at 23%. Given where we're at in the fiscal year, that 23%, we're hopefully going to target around 60 or 70% allocation by the end of this fiscal year. We do have two projects that are coming in this upcoming May PSR that's supposed to be around 15 to 20 million. So that's going to be a good chunk. So we're going to see some big construction projects come in to help spend these funds. Just kind of give you a brief rundown. MP, we're at 31% allocation. Our state transportation equity fund, we're at 59%. The state general fund appropriation, that's toward one project, and that's coming in at the May PSR. So hopefully we'll see all that spent at the next TAC meeting. Local, we've had 9% allocation. Apportionment funding, again, that's on two major projects, construction projects coming in hopefully before the end of this fiscal year. So we should see that apportionment money allocated in its entirety, hopefully by the June TAC. Covered relief funding such as CARES and ARPA, we've allocated about $245,000, and through the bill program, the ATP, we received one grant for $475,000, and we've allocated that completely. And the bill AIG, we've allocated about 36%. So next slide, please, Ryan. So again, total program projects, so you'll see this number occurring again and again, but 234 of the program projects, 76 have come in. So we've executed about 32% of the ACIP from a programming standpoint. 62 projects have been notified to us that they are being removed or delayed from the ACIP. So that leaves a remaining total program project balance of 96. So we still have 41% of the ACIP to execute. And really encourage airports over the next few months to get those projects in, to get those dollars allocated so we can spend those. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Okay, under agenda item 10, the next part we're going to have is the funding request presentations. And I think the first one on there is Murray County, correct?
Working. Is that working?
You'll have to hold it down.
Just like it is.
Should light up green. Yep, you're good.
Oh, good. Thank you, sir. Good morning. So I'm Tom Acker. I'm the chairman of the Murray County Airport Authority. And we're here to ask for assistance with funding on the design for a new terminal for the airport. Next slide, please. So just kind of like the latest, greatest hits in terms of the visuals and the existing structure. It's about somewhere between 50 and 60 years past its useful life. It may be the oldest terminal in the state. We're not sure about that, but we've got to be close. Most remarkably, you have the whole electrical system for the entire airport is directly behind the manager's office, adjacent to. So no longer code, no longer really considered safe. That needs to be changed. And the other things that are kind of desperate there is that the entire terminal, there is no part of it that is actually ADA compliant. The entrance doors, the entrance ways, the bathrooms, the hallways, none of the adjoining doors, none of it is ADA compliant. And frankly, there are times at the airport where that's just plain embarrassing. So that's the old, that's what it is. So it turns out that it's a 1961 original build. And so with the next slide, please. So what we want to do is we want to expand it slightly and reconstruct basically from the ground up. We're going to add additional capacity of about 1,800 square feet. A partial second story is planned really more for an observation deck and for a community use area than for the airport per se. And the site layout will be is designed to accommodate cargo operations. Right now, when cargo aircraft land, they're using the main ramp. We have to bring the big trucks onto the field, actually through the gate onto the airport to load and unload. That's really not acceptable. This new layout plan will keep them off of the airport facility proper. We'll go through the gate with the cargo, but we'll give them a much better place to bring those trucks in and turn around. Just parenthetically, the cargo operations sell about 180,000 gallons of Jet A for us a year. And that really is what funds the airport today is that cargo jet fuel sales. So facilitating that going forward is really the most important thing for us. Next slide, please. Quick rendering of the back. We're trying to be reasonably consistent with the town of Mount Pleasant as they're developing around us. Some of those older industrial buildings are being upgraded. We're trying to stay modern, but in concert with where the other structures are as you go down Main Street in Mount Pleasant. But at the same time, try to look a little bit more polished and a little bit more professional than the existing structure you saw a few minutes ago. Next slide, please. So why is the project necessary? Well, originally constructed in 1961, there was apparently some renovation that was done in 74, but you really can't tell it from looking at it. The project will include actually the demolition of the existing building under the new object-free area requirements for 3/4 mile visibility landing. We've got to push back to 500 feet. The existing terminal actually is inside of that, but grandfathered. When we take it down, we're gonna have to push back just a little bit. So we'll be mostly on the same footprint, but we've got to take the whole building down and rebuild from there to comply with those new requirements. Most importantly, comply with FAA safety. After that, it's bring the upgrades to the facility to be compliant with the ADA. Increase the capacity, which is again, mostly community use rooms, so that we can hold small events like we do youth days at the airport. We've got no good place to put them. We empty out hangars and put the kids in the hangars for the day. It works, but it's not great. Importantly as anything else from a business development standpoint, you know, the airport's the first impression for visiting investors in the county. The first impression they get today is fairly poor. We would like to make a credible first impression and have a meeting room, not quite as nice as this, but presentable enough so that we can have CEOs of Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart come in and sit down and talk with our business development people in the county, you know, about possibilities and opportunities there. So that's really what's driving all of this. We're going to relocate the electrical vault so my airport manager doesn't continually get sterilized by the EGOS that's emitted from that. Although Sherry doesn't seem to object. Enhanced curb appeal a little bit, but not going crazy. Conference room and educational facilities. Itinerant pilot facilities are important. We don't have any good hotel structure in the county for pilots. The nearest decent hotels are about a 35 or 40-minute drive away. That's a real negative from a pilot standpoint. So as comfortable as we can make them in the building is going to be important to keep those pilots who help drive a lot of decisions about where airplanes land. Everybody understands that. So we've got to keep, you know, the pilot as comfortable as we can while they're on the field. And then parking and that freight delivery infrastructures, you know, just going to really help us continue to maintain the high level of freight that we handle at Murray County. Next slide, please. Why is the project necessary? We've pretty well gone through that. We're trying to do it as inexpensively as we possibly can. We're using the same space, already have environmental approvals. Tennessee Aero is kind enough to, in the task, you know, they acknowledge that we should be playing a regional service role. So we actually think we're worth investment. The county and the two cities who are our board appointees are willing to invest in us. We'll talk about that in just a second. And the current estimate is that our annual economic impact to the community is about $14 million. Next slide, please. So we'll design a new terminal. The terminal siting's already been completed. Design the parking improvements. With that, you can see some of the T there to get those bigger trucks in and out of the facility without going onto the airport proper. It's a relatively modest 60 by 80 foot building footprint. The environmental has already been approved by TDOT Aeronautics, and we know we're positioned to obtain an FAA airspace clearance. Next slide, please. So the real question everybody should have is how the heck are we going to pay for this? And so we have been applying for the FAA build terminal funds. We did not get selected those. Those seem to go predominantly to the large carriers and the other commercial airports out there that have, you know, actual passenger service, and we do not. We have applied for FAA supplemental appropriation, and we're waiting to hear back on that, as JP was talking about previously. The airport is continuing to pursue any other funding opportunities to help bolster this project. As I leave here today, I'll be drafting a letter. In Murray County, the Industrial Development Board has a sudden surplus of $3.5 million. We sold a speculative building in one of the sponsored developments called Cherry Glen, and they had $2 million they never did spend. So it's $3.5 million suddenly in a bucket. It's controlled by Mount Pleasant Power, the city of Mount Pleasant, and the county. We actually have letters from the mayor of the county, from the mayor of Columbia, and from the mayor of Mount Pleasant, suggesting that we should receive about $2 million of that money for this project because they consider part of industrial development to present that positive face coming in. So that would be a big help to get us started. We also think that we can use some of the airport's own money. We think that even with the shutdown that we're about to go through with the runway rebuild, that we're going to be able to contribute $200,000 or $300,000 of our own money. We think that we can get about $700,000 in naming rights on parts of the building. We think that, for example, like the West Family Memorial Terminal sounds like a great name. It's just a matter of how many zeros behind. But actually, we've gotten interest in that already. Some of the guys who are going to help us develop the land we're buying to the other side of the airport, who want to build big hangars, are fairly famous. They'd like to have their name associated with the terminal. So we actually had interest in selling naming rights for conference rooms and the lobby area and stuff like that. So actually, we do think that the $700,000, maybe $800,000 is entirely doable. That leaves us still needing to come up with about $1 million in cash. And by the time we're done, on the next slide, please. I'm hoping it's the next slide. Well, it'll be another set off. So it's about $4 million all in. We can probably do a little bit less than that, but the way the prices are going, I'm not going to bet on it. So it's going to be, $4 million. Next slide, please. So the new terminal siting study, we've already paid for that. The airport's been funding this out of our own pocket to get this work started. Our original objective was to try to time this as close as we could to the runway work so that we had the minimum disruption for our traffic as possible. We were doing the best we can to keep it close, but there'll be some separation there. And so there's a project now for a new terminal design bid of about $425,000. Next slide, please. So we're here today to ask your review and approval of that. Rough schedule is to get that executed in May, design kickoff in June, complete the design in February, and open the bids in March. Closeout of that, of course, is going to be contingent, frankly, upon whether or not I come up with that extra $1 million. Right? So next slide, please. For this particular request for that funding, that we're going to use NPE funds, bill funds, state funds, and the local funds. And again, the local funds will all be coming from the airport directly. Next slide, please. Oh, wrong one. Okay. So back on the funding question, I just pitched to the budget committee for Murray County to get $280,000 to buy 8.5 acres immediately adjacent to the airport. That's just open land right now. We actually got that approved. So we'll go ahead and we're going through a condemnation process on that. We'll execute on that. Now we'll have 8 acres for really nice sized hangars for individual investors. It'll all be private money developing it. The airport's not going to put a penny of our own money into doing that. We're pretty confident that there's plenty of demand to make that happen. In that budget committee meeting, I got scolded for the appearance of our terminal. And having learned from Butch all these years, I said, well, for an extra $1 million or $2 million, I can solve that problem. So they said, well, please submit that request. So that last $1 million is actually, I think, will easily come from the county. They actually, and I'm not kidding, they actually asked me in the public meeting to present that request next year. So by the time we're at the schedule on that for the opening the bid grants, I should have that from the county in their budget cycle. I should have that extra $1 million in hand. Hopefully more, so that we can take a little pressure off the other sides, because I'm expecting prices will go up. I've taken too long. I apologize. Any questions? Butch, did you bring your checkbook?
You building a hangar too? Huh? Yeah. Tom, thank you for your presentation. Do we have a motion for approval of the project?
Mr. Chairman, this is George Huddleston. I move that we approve as presented.
Do we have a motion for approval? Do we have a second?
I'll second. Butch West.
Okay, do we have any comments, discussion, questions?
This is George Huddleston again. I've got one question that I just realized. On slide number 7 that you all sent to us, I think it's slide number 32 in this presentation, entitled Scope Summary. Go back there. There. In the photo, you show the long side of the new building facing the jet. In this drawing, it shows the long side of the old building facing the air side, but the drawing for the proposed terminal building shows the short side facing the air side. Help me understand if that's an error, Tom.
I think what we've got is an older preliminary drawing being presented. So to that extent, yeah, that's an error because the building definitely rotates.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Nice presentation.
Thank you very much.
Next up, Morristown.
Good morning. I'm Andrew Ellard with the City of Morristown, the Morristown Regional Airport. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present our proposed project. We have I guess one of those good problems to have with a lot of pressure for more growth and use at the airport. That's also driving demand for more hangar space and that kind of thing. Namely near runway 5 there, if you go to the next slide, I believe Chuck popped in some aerial views for us to see kind of what kind of changes we've seen just in recent years. This is seen it labeled as the south, or really the western end of the airport property. And in the last 10 years, we've seen 5 larger hangars added to that end of the airport. That end has very quickly become more of the corporate end of our airport, with the other end, the east end of our airport, being more dedicated to T hangar spaces. So recently, the city, the airport, was approached by someone who has interest in building hangars similar to these you see in the image on this taxi lane, and we really just kind of put a pin in that for the moment, because we said we have all this land a little bit further west, and as with any airport, we want to be sure that the land is being used to the best, most efficient way possible. To plant a hangar where they wanted it in this image would have really just blocked us off from future development to the west. If you see the next slide, this is a little bit difficult to see, but on the far left side there, that's the west end, and that dark line there is the proposed taxi lane that would extend off of that newest taxi lane. And what we've had our engineers take a look at is just different scenarios for growth with hangars, depending on various sizes of different hangars, to use that space as efficiently as possible. And in every scenario, they all include a row of about 5 or 6 80 by 80 boxes on the south end of that taxi lane, and then various different scenarios on the north side, depending on what kind of development may come or what other kind of economic development opportunities related to aviation might come our way. The next slide. So really our intent here is to design this area so that we can get to the point of bidding, but in reality, I believe that based on the conversations we've had with the development community already, I feel like in the next couple of months we will have some terms together where we may have a public-private partnership opportunity, which is really what created those last 3 hangars in that 2023 aerial image you saw. So we think that we might get through this design process that we're requesting here and maybe end up de-scoping the bid process if it so happens that we have the right kind of public-private partnership available, that someone else is actually going to perform that work. We just want to be sure that it's performed the way that it needs to be done for the future of the development of that area. The next slide. This is just a preliminary cost estimate beyond the design phase, what it may cost to develop out that taxiway area. And of course, that line just showed you one straight line that's between 700 and 800 feet extending to the west. some of our conceptual designs also include other alternatives that have flags that might go to the north off of that. Again, just trying to take advantage of space where we can. But $639,215 is the estimate for the construction cost when that time comes. The next slide. For the engineering phase, $93,500 is the estimate that we've been provided for performing all the design and environmental work that would need to be done at that end of the property. And the next slide. We've already, of course, as I mentioned, kind of done some of the conceptual design work. We expect that if awarded, that this would kick off pretty quickly and actually wrap up pretty quickly as well, with completion towards the end of the summer, around July 30th. Next slide. And our proposed breakdown with this is to utilize bill funds for the majority of the 90%, with 5% each from the state and city funds. That's the extent of my presentation. I think this is, in the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of demand come out of the development community in particular. There is a waiting list for T-hanger space as well, but it seems to not have quite the demand we have right now for some of the larger box hangars. And this end of our airport, to the extent possible, we believe that needs to be the focus, is the more corporate end of the business there. Be glad to answer any questions.
I move we accept Morristown's proposal as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Steve Wright, I second.
We have a second. Do we have any questions, comments, discussion for Andrew?
Andrew, I just got one question. I assume you guys already own this property.
Yes, sir. The city owns everything all the way to what you see there is Highway 160, State Route 160.
What are your proposed rents, Andrew, or does that depend on if you're going to get that private?
I think that will largely depend on the public-private partnership. It's not going to be our intent as the city or the airport to build spec hangars or anything like that. I feel like from the conversation we've heard about what developers are wanting to do right now, I don't think we would have to do that.
So what are you getting as rents for the hangars that you have right now?
That's a very good question. We have we're actually undergoing a study right now of kind of all of our hangars that are out there. Our arrangement with our FBO that operates the day-to-day there, they actually handle the majority of all the rents at with the hangars on the airfield, mostly the T hangars and some of the big box. A few of the big boxes, most of the ones that the city manages specifically, are those that are in some kind of a ground lease already and they've not expired yet. So it's almost unfair to compare one to another because they're all at various stages there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries.
Thank you for your time.
Next up, B&A John Toon.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Keith Wilsheets. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Strategic Planning at the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority. And we appreciate you allowing us to come and request this funding for us. This is for an important project for us. We're proud of how this airport has come back in the last 2 years after the tornado. And one of the last pieces that we really do need to address is public parking. That right now there are 67 parking spaces, and we want to expand that, and we're here to ask for some funding for that. What I'd like to do is ask my colleague Duncan Bauer to walk you through this presentation and answer your questions, and then hopefully we'll get a positive result in the end. So, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Keith. Thank you, Commissioners. So yeah, I'm here to speak with you today about the terminal parking lot expansion project at John C. Toon. And in order to accommodate the continued aviation growth and demand that John C. Toon has been experiencing, we need to expand our parking lot here. So the project consists of the final design and bidding services performed by our selected engineering firm, Atkins. And the project area is east and northeast of Toon Airport Drive, adjacent from the existing FBO terminal. The grant is an amendment to an initial design grant that we received in October that funded up to 30% design. This grant will take design from 30% to 100% and support the design and bidding phase of this project. Next slide. So here's just a site overview of the area that we're talking about. You can see the existing parking lot off to the left, Tune Drive adjacent to the red outlined area, which is the area that we're speaking to today. Next slide. So the final design and bidding services, preparation of construction quantity estimates and estimated costs, assisting with bid evaluations and recommendation of award to a contractor to do the work, and then preparation of issued for construction documents that will be handed over to the contractor that is selected for the project. Off to the right, you can see a more detailed site plan for the parking lot expansion that we're speaking to, which I'll get into some more specifics about that in the next slide. So you can see here off to the left the breakdown of the bid schedules for the project. In the purple, bid schedule 1, 72 additional parking spaces. Bid schedule 2 is bid schedule 1 with an additional 32 for 104 total spaces. And we option to add an alternate, which will add 19 spaces on top of whichever bid schedule that we choose to go forward with. And if we choose bid schedule 2 in the alternate, the 123 spaces that will be added to our parking system at John C. Tune. And below that is just a square footage breakdown of the bid schedules in the alternate. And should we choose bid schedule 2 and alternate 1, we will be at 44,000 additional square feet of parking space, approximately 1 acre. Next slide. So the engineering cost estimate for this design phase is $57,400. Next. And then the engineer's construction estimate for the construction of this parking lot is broken down here. Bid schedule 2 and alternate 1 being ideal is estimated at $2,552,000. And the note below, this project was already bid out for construction. We only received 1 bid, and the bid was significantly over what we were anticipating based on our estimate. At this time, we're not certain what the course of action is going to be, but we would anticipate rebidding at some point. Next slide. So here's the project schedule. As you can see, we're currently at task number 5, the TAC meeting today. But based off that note on the previous slide, we're going to be shifting back to task 2 if that is the course of action that we plan on going forward with, if a negotiation is not going to be possible with the sole bidder. And if the solicitation is rejected, then we will be going back to advertisement, and we will begin that process again. Next slide. So here's the financial breakdown covering both the initial grant and then the amendment that we're speaking to today. The initial grant that we received back in October is $72,800. Today we are seeking an additional federal non-primary entitlement of $51,660 with state and local match of $2,870 apiece for a total of $57,400. The cumulative total for this design project is $131,200. Next slide, please. So here's more of a simplified phase 2 amendment request to the grant. As I said, $51,660 for non-primary entitlements, state funds, $2,870 local funds, $2,870 for a requested amount today of $57,400. I believe that's it. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions if you have them.
I have one.
Yes.
The faces, could you go back to the colored slide, please? The purple on the bottom and the yellow, that's a pretty expensive alternative with only 1 row of parking through there. Do you know if the design considered putting retaining walls on those outsides and expanding that to where there were 2 rows like there are going up the other side? And I would tell you, I think if you did, you probably wouldn't need the green to get the same amount of parking spots. And the contractor in me knows that that's pretty much all cut, pretty steep cut in it on the going down when it turns going out.
Correct, yes.
Okay, that material probably has to be hauled off at pretty good expense. If you were to dump it down here, put your retaining walls in, I think you lower your overall cost considerably.
Okay.
That's all up.
Jump in on that one. There we go. The purple around the, or not the purple, the gold around the bend, that has a retaining wall attached to it. And that's actually why it's a alternate, because the cost per space is pretty pricey with that retaining wall. And so we may choose not to go that route at all. So if we did a double-sided and have a 60-foot parking bay, I don't think you'd have enough room for the setback requirement. And that was the problem. We'd like to have that, but there's no way to do that. On that section, you can see everything has a setback. If we expanded those two on the, I guess it'd be on the east side, there wouldn't be enough room. So, yes, we have.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the John C. Toon new parking lot.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Butch West.
Any additional comments, questions, discussion?
It's my understanding that the bid came in, the single bid came in like at $1 million more. Mr. West has an open wallet here.
That's what I understand.
If you name a parking space.
You're right.
I think we could do that.
The west lot?
You could get that $1 million. Seriously, Keith, though, you have a proposal to move and add a terminal.
Mm-hmm.
When is that going to happen, and how much of a return on investment are you going to get on this particular parking project if you're going to be moving?
In the interim, yeah.
We do have plans to move the terminal, and we're actually going to move it closer to this parking lot than it is today. Right now, the terminal is on the, let's get turned around with my locations or my dimensions. It's north of the current parking lot. That's actually going to be moved a little bit south and west. So it'll actually be adjacent to the parking lot today.
See that?
Yeah, I don't know if you have
I can point
an
it out.
aerial, if you have an aerial photo of it.
I mean, in the airport.
Yeah,
terminal
so-
zone?
If you go to the first slide that shows the overview, easier. Yeah, so that's the existing terminal today, and it's going to just be shifted south further.
Because it's a 20-minute, we were told it was a 20-minute walk, even from the crowded current parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 20-minute walk to the airport terminal. Right?
Well, I mean, that's the current parking lot. I guess some people might take 20 minutes. I wouldn't need 20 minutes,
I
but
think that was based on the ALP and where it showed a future terminal.
yeah, and the ALP shows the future terminal, as Duncan had said, about halfway down that current parking lot. Yeah. And in terms of timing, we're going to do it when demand warrants. My guess is it'll probably be 3 to 5 years from now, but we're going to keep an eye on the demand and figure out when the demand warrants are.
Good question, good answer.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Keith, this is George Huddleston. I wonder if, I know there's some grade challenges in there. I wonder if it would be better to look at this as a clean sheet of paper and possibly relocating the road so that we could maximize density with the parking in this area. I know you still have to connect to the going in Alternative Plaza, but I just wondered if y'all looked at that.
We did. We actually looked at 7 different alternatives in addition to the no action. And I'm not sure, Commissioner, where you're thinking of relocating the road, but one thing that we did look at is pushing the road farther to the right on this drawing. What we found was we couldn't get the circulation to work as well inside the parking lot. We found it's better to have the road go through where it is today and have parking on both sides of it. And then we can maximize the parking that we allowed, and the intersection that goes back into Cisco would work better. We had a little more room to get those turning movements done. And so of the 7 different alternatives we looked at, including, by the way, we considered, which we did not pursue, we considered asking Cisco if we could lease part of their parking lot. We decided not to go that route. We looked at a parking garage, build a parking garage on the current lot. That just didn't pencil out. And then we looked at different configurations of how we could put these spaces in the same general area, and this one by far came out as number 1.
I was just looking at the way in your green shaded area on the slide that shows bid schedule 2, you have double dive in there. And in the opposite end, you have apparently a similarly spaced dotted line, but you only have single with an angle dive in.
Could you explain that a little bit? I'm sorry, I wasn't following you. Where, are you talking about the 2 entrances?
On this slide that's here, the green on top,
Right.
you've got enough width for a double dive, and your dotted lines look to be about the same width apart as they are on the purple on the opposite end of the parking, and you only have a single with an angle dive there. So that was what I was thinking, was that maybe the road could be shifted so that for not any extra land, you could get double dives on a lot of that. Without seeing
Possibly.
the guessing, I don't know.
Yeah, I can say we looked at every way to maximize the number of spaces and still have dual lanes between, in the middle of the parking bay. So you could go back and forth, double in, double out on both the north and the south. And this was the most optimal configuration that we could come up with.
Thank you.
Okay. Proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Under agenda item number 11 is next is old business. Is there any old business? Being none, we move to the next agenda item, which is 12, which is new business. Any new business? Okay, being none, next item is item number 13, and that's under announcements. I'm going to let JP's got a couple of announcements he needs to talk about.
Yes, thank you. So the first one is the Great Tennessee Air Show. Put a plug in for the Smyrna Airport. That is going to be held June 10th through the 11th at the airport. So they're selling tickets now. I know some of them are going fast. They have some more exclusive tickets if you want kind of a better seat and better amenities. So there's the website for that if you Google it. I don't know the exact address, but something really exciting. It happens every other year, so great opportunity coming up in early June there. And then the next public meeting will be June 29th, so that last Thursday of the month in June. So that's all I had for announcements. But thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Which West?
Meeting adjourned. We'll have to vote on that. We did.
I'm just waiting on that lottery number. I'm just waiting on that winning lottery number, but it's gonna have to be, in order to get my whole wish list, I gotta wait till it gets up to about a quarter of a billion.
Yeah, well, we can sell them pencils in the meantime.
That's right, I feel that.
Oh, man. How's Mr. Hickman?